Happy Veterans Day. I'm Justin Talon from Pacific Rex, and today we have a sort of special virtual presentation. Last year, a dog tag was found in Papua New Guinea, and this dog tag had a name on it. At the time, that name was a person who I didn't know anything about other than the details that were on the tag. A year later, with the help of Florian, the tag was able to be identified and the daughter of the owner found. So today on Veterans Day, I'd like to share the story of this dog tag, how it was found, and a little bit about the life of the person whose name is on it. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce Florian.
Yeah, my name is Florian Vital. I'm living in Wisconsin. I'm actually the command historian of the Wisconsin Army National Guard. I've been working on a project in regards to Battle of Buna in Papua New Guinea. Got to know Justin quite well. We started talking once that dog tag was found. And then from there, I actually started helping him on my free time as well to try to connect that dog tag back to anybody that might still be available from the family. And here we are.
This is a photo of the woman who found the dog tag. Her name was Joyce Idana of Saidor, Papua New Guinea. She, at the time she found the tag, was 24 years old, was digging a garden to plant crops, and located this relic of World War II. The dog tag itself is in remarkable condition, and it says on it, Bernard W. Nelson.
My name is Ruth Strand. I was Ruth Nelson before I married. And my dad was Bernard Walford Woodrow Nelson from Skaney, Michigan. And he was enlisted in the U.S. Army in April of 1941. And so, yes, then ended up in the South Pacific, and as you'll get to later. And I'm his oldest daughter.
Well, tell us a little bit about your father, his life growing up in the United States, where he was from in Michigan, and how he came to join the U.S. Army.
Okay. He grew up in a predominantly Swedish immigrant farming community, farming in the sense of clearing space in the deep woods of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I think he was about 80 acres of land his father had, but only 10 or 12 of that was cleared. So they had cattle and chickens and horses, and they kind of eked out a living there in the woods. He was the oldest of 4 children, and when things started getting in an uproar in the world, he knew that there was a draft, and he had a low draft number. I think he said it was 40, and so he knew he would be called early. And I think he said rumors or hearsay was if you enlisted, maybe you would get, I don't know if the word is preferential treatment, but maybe a little bit more choice about where and how you served. So in April of 1941, he enlisted. And he spent that first year in the States with training. I think it was in Louisiana, Massachusetts. And then I think, as I told you, I believe they were training to go to probably Ireland or at least Europe. Then plans changed and they were sent to the South Pacific in April of 1942.
Wow.
So it just kind of amazes me. It was 17 miles to town for him. So I'm sure most of his life centered around being on the farm in this very small community where there was a church and a school and farms. That was it. And so to all of a sudden be thrust into this huge world outside of that small area, it must have been quite mind-boggling what he was experiencing and seeing. And, I'm sure he'd never obviously been on a plane or on a ship or anything. So anyway, it must have been a real drastic change for him.
Incredible. And Florian, can you tell a little bit about his unit? Of course, he was a member of the 32nd Infantry Division, Red Arrows, in the Signal Company. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. So yeah, he was part of the 32nd, which consisted mainly of National Guard troops that came from Wisconsin and Michigan. And just like you said, we read that, of course, in his small biography. He actually did his basic training in Louisiana. That's where they were then activated. And he was with the 107th Engineers at first, which is kind of interesting because that is the one unit from the 32nd that would end up in the European theater. So they were sent before, and of course he wasn't part of it though, but he went through basic training with them. I guess, was one of the folks that stayed behind because he was part of the signal company, but he went through basic training with the engineers. Engineers would leave, and they would end up in Ireland, and they would be doing all the fighting in Europe, while the rest of the unit, the 32nd Infantry Division, would end up in the Pacific Theater.
Wow. And Ruth, how does it feel to think that your dad's dog tag survived for more than 80 years in Papua New Guinea until this young lady found it and agreed to give it to Pacific Rex to try and find you? What does that mean to you? What are your thoughts or feelings about that amazing serendipity?
Well, it's just kind of what a shock it was to get this message from Florian about a year ago. And it's like, really? But I do have his dog tag. So obviously he lost it or whatever and then had it replaced. So that was a little bit of a surprise. Like, what do you mean he found his dog tag? I have his dog tags. But yeah, it just kind of makes it maybe a little more real or something, putting him in space and time on the other side of the world. And that these 80 years later, this woman doing her gardening finds his tag. And then you find me. It's interesting.
Absolutely. Well, the greatest benefit of doing this work is, of course, what you can share with us. Until we found you, we only knew his name. We didn't know anything about his service. And I was surprised with what you shared. Can you tell about what your dad kept from the war and wrote down and you have now shared with us?
Sure. So once I had contact with Florian, I happened to mention that my dad had kept kind of shabby little note diaries while he was overseas. I don't have anything from when he was stateside, and they're not any beautiful. They're little memo books. You know, they're even not even meant to be. They're like a telegraph or memo pads, and some of them, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but some of them even he probably carried because there's notes in there what he was doing, right? You know, certain number of feet, certain height of poles, certain, you know, lists, things like that, or even addresses, I'm guessing, saying contact, you know, Joe Brown's missus when you get back, and, you know, addresses and things like that. But among the majority of it is diaries he kept pretty much daily, a lot of the time over that 3 years. And so I mentioned this to Florian, and of course he was interested as a historian. And it made me think I really ought to get these written down, because even though my dad had beautiful handwriting, you know, weather in the South Pacific, the moisture, the shabbiness of these being carried, them 80 years old, they're a little worse for the wear. So I thought I really should be typing them. And, you know, life gets busy and you procrastinate and you do things. And just talking with him over this last year, I kind of let it lay. And then this fall, when we contacted me again, I thought I have got to sit down and transcribe these. So I spent a period of a few weeks, a little bit every day, typing, doing my best to kind of interpret place names and abbreviations, trying not to mess with the content at all. It's not even complete sentences really sometimes. But I just found it was like, I told my husband, I said, I feel like I'm visiting my dad a little bit every day. Just reading his words again, right? So I have to thank you for persevering and finding me, which probably wasn't super easy, and starting this process. It's benefited me. It's given me much pleasure to record this, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to share this with you. I mean, it's fun to see other people excited about your dad or history, right? So yes, I'm very grateful for this whole process, how this was a very pleasant surprise.
Incredible. Well, Ruth, I can say as a student of history, of all the veterans that I've interacted with, it's very unique that your dad kept such a detailed diary. And thanks to your effort and your transcriptions, it's now available to read. We hope to share more of that later. But I can't stress how unique it is for a soldier to not only keep a diary, but to have it survive all these years through moves, through different family members. It's remarkable. And I think it'll be a rich resource to show the experience of an ordinary soldier in New Guinea, in the Philippines, in the 32nd Infantry Division. Florin, do you have any thoughts about the diary, or are there a couple parts that you would like to mention or read or kind of discuss his career and places he served?
Yeah, most definitely very unique. And, he starts off April 20th, 1942, when they board the USS Ancon at Pier 7 in San Francisco. And that diary goes all the way through until he makes it back in 1945. And just the things he talks about going over to Australia at first, meeting with the Australian families, and then of course returning after his first combat too. Some of the training is really, from a military history standpoint, really interesting. And then really November 26th of 1942, Thanksgiving, that is when he arrives in Port Moresby Harbor in the morning time. And that is really when he starts talking about how he experiences combat for the first time. I just stayed in a pub tent with my helmet on, my heart sure done some pounding. So that is the first time, he sees, Japanese planes overhead, and it goes on and on. It's just great examples, such as December 27th. That is actually when he goes to Buna. So that is the battle I really researched. The first time the 32nd went into ground combat. Most of that 32nd was already at combat, and he makes it to Buna on December 27th, and left Port Moresby by plane. A Lockheed Hudson Aussie pilot had to turn back on account enemy planes in vicinity. It's just amazing of how much detail there's in. And I think he's also talked quite a bit about the natives, what they discover after Buna really fell. Talking about cannibalism and things like that. No food for weeks. And on January 23rd, very soldier-like of what he talks about. And I think a lot of books talk about the Eichelberger Square, but he actually puts it in his diary. Lieutenant General Eichelberger got a DSC for this campaign. The 127th Infantry alone has a cemetery of 300 men, and this is what they call Eichelberger Square. His DSC, the Signal Colonel Attenslaut, also got a DSC for good signal communication. But who did the work? Us. He didn't get out of division headquarters. So it is just great of seeing that. And I think one last thing I want to, and this is just now in the beginning, all Buna, there's so much more afterwards when he talks about going to the Philippines, of course, before Saidor, where the ID tag was found. But I think especially today during Veterans Day, I think there's a nice last entry there when he says on November 21st, Lieutenant Lenny Ross was here and put on a program, sang his old theme, Moonlight and Roses. He sure is a natural. I believe he beats Bing Crosby. Two sailors singing and playing were very good. One had a song he made up about his LST, which was nice. 741 anti-aircraft sang for spiritual and later tap dance. If they would have had something other than GI shoes, they would have been unbeatable. An American nurse, new here, sang beautifully. Lasted to about 11 o'clock. And the 126th Infantry played several numbers like an amateur show. It sure is surprising how much talent this army brings together. Rich and poor, famous and hillbilly, all in for one cause, victory and assurance of a peaceful America again. Ended with all standing and singing, Lenny Rose leading, God Bless America. I think that is very fitting for today's date. And of course, to remember, there's so many hard times that he, of course, had to endure, and all of the soldiers, but it's also, the time together. That is really what makes that brotherhood, sisterhood for the soldiers.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. It's hard to believe your dad wrote that, Ruth, and it's his experiences, and we're so So glad to have them and that you shared them. His diaries, though, are not the only surprise. You also have many of his photographs. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, he has an album here. It's probably got over 200 pictures. They're small. Some of them are in poor shape. A lot of them stateside, and then a lot in Australia. Probably more time to take pictures. But some of the ones down in the South Pacific, yeah, are very intriguing. It would be helpful to have them, as we've spoken, maybe enlarged or enhanced. They're very little. They're only about 2 inches by 3 inches, black and white. But yeah, and he also has a package of pictures it's about 30 pictures he must have purchased from, I believe I told you, the Department of Information from the Commonwealth of Australia. And they each came with a typed slip of paper that explains what you're seeing. And I found those helpful, even though they're not his personal pictures. It helped me, being not a military person, see what he was talking about. Oh, that's what a Japanese pillbox was like. Or, oh, here's some native Papua New Guineans carrying on stretchers, wounded, or just things that I wouldn't have understood unless I had those pictures. So that was helpful too.
Wow.
Those are very...
The photo album, can you show it in front of you, or
Sure.
do you have any of the pictures there?
It looks like it actually must have been purchased. Like it has a insignia here, a military, an eagle anyway. And so something like, where is this? Well, here, I told you, we talked a little bit previously about how thin they got. Let's see. There's a picture of my dad after I think they used some grenades in some river to fish. You can see how thin he is, but he's holding up, I guess, a bass or whatever here. But yeah, there's small pictures, as you can see, compared to my hand. And I believe I shared with you that he has some pictures that are labeled Saidor. And I thought, wouldn't it have been a nice closing to the story if he had written in his diary, I lost my dog tag today, but no. But there is a picture of him that he's labeled with him and 3 others bathing and washing their clothes in a river in Saidor.
Remarkable.
Who lost it? Who knows?
Well, it's proof that he was there, and I guess you're doubly lucky that you have both his words and images. It wasn't common for many people in the Pacific War to have their own camera or to have the time or the ability to take pictures. So that's an exciting album that is another component to his story. Thank you so much for sharing those. Yeah, I'm surprised he had a camera too. He grew up in the Depression. He was very frugal. My mother says that his fellow soldiers teased him often and said, "What are you doing, putting your pay in milk cans?" Something. He didn't. Yeah, he was careful with his dollars his whole life. Wow.
He's a good steward.
And mention a little bit about his life after the war. He came back at the 1945. What was your dad's life like post-war? What was his career? When did he get married and have his children, including you?
Yeah, well, I know from what he verbally said to us, and I have no letters that he wrote home. Those have been passed out of the family's hands. But there was a letter from a fellow soldier, and he was talking to my dad saying, "So you're trying to decide between being a farmer and going to college." And my dad, I remember him telling us in the family, and literally in one of these notebooks, he's written down the whole GI Bill of Rights. He must have copied it from somewhere. So he was very interested in going to college, I think. He had been a good student. He was one of only 13 in his high school class down there in Skainey, and he was salutatorian. He was trying to decide about going to college or what, and he told us, my dad was ever practical, that if he went to college, it'd be 4 years before he got out, and all these people coming home from the war would flood the job market, all looking for jobs. So maybe it'd be better for him to just get a job with a good place and get the jump on those 4 years that everyone else is in college. So anyway, according to his little autobiography that he wrote up, he must have spent the first few months just recovering at home on the farm. And then he went to work in a local sawmill down there in Skaney. It was lots of logging because it's heavily wooded. And then by the next June, he got a job with Michigan Bell Telephone Company. And I'm assuming that he was an attractive person to hire because what he did in the war was communications, right? So he was repairing and installing telephones for a while, was in Houghton, then to St. Ignace and Mackinac Island, actually installing phones in the big Grand Hotel, I think, there on the island. And then eventually transferred back to Calumet and Houghton. And my mother was a telephone operator, and he didn't meet her until later in the 50s. So they got married in 1959. So he was old to be getting married. And so then after they got married, they had 2 children. I'm the oldest. And then I have a sister that's 2.5 years younger than me. And so then he stayed with Michigan Bell Telephone Company for, I think, 33 years before he retired, and enjoyed that work. And yeah, that's how his life went. So it's interesting to think back, domino effect, all, if you hadn't gotten a low draft number, if you hadn't gone to the military, if you hadn't been in the Signal Corps, if you hadn't been gotten a job with Michigan Bell Telephone or met my mom. Anyway, wow. It's interesting how God directs our steps. And yeah.
Well, he was also your dad. Did he ever speak to you growing up about his wartime experiences, mention New Guinea or the Philippines or Australia, or was that something you really only knew from his letters and diaries?
No, he talked about it a little bit, but I've been racking my brain, but it's been a lot of years. My dad's passed away in 1994, so I never got the sense that he was living with trauma. And occasionally military buddies would come to town and visit. I don't remember sitting in on the conversations much. So I was trying to think of what he told me that wouldn't have been in the diaries. And it's just a few things, like I told you about deciding about college or not. He talked about Eleanor Roosevelt coming to visit the troops in the South Pacific, and he was there. And he said, well, only the snappy dressers got seated at her table. I assume maybe in the military, can you buy extra? It's not just the uniform you're given, but anyway, it was something to do with that he didn't have all the extra finery. But he did talk about that. He talked about his feet being wet continually because we probably as children said, what's wrong with your toenails? Because he had a fungal infection of his toenails his entire life. And I think he talked about having wet feet and marching. And one rather gruesome story, he talked about, I think if I understood right, that the Japanese soldiers often had flags, replica small flags inside their helmets, and people would look for those for souvenirs. And my dad saw a helmet in a ditch and went over to flip the helmet over to see if there was a flag in it, and didn't realize, and he stepped in a decaying body. And I think his comment was he never could get rid of the odor in the boots. And I think the boots were new. So, that was not a very pleasant story, but I guess to a child's mind, that would have been a horror, me hearing that. I can't think of too many other things that he mentioned. He loved Australia. He talked about that. And if they had been able to travel, my mom kind of had some serious health conditions in her life. And so no big trips like that. We did a lot of trips in the States, but yeah, he would have loved to have gone back to Australia. And he mentions that, as you probably read in the diary several times, how sociable the people were. That was his word.
Incredible.
Well,
your dad sounds like quite an amazing guy. I regret that we can't put the dog tag back in his hands, but you, as his daughter, is just as exciting. So I guess without further ado, we're not together physically, but today on Veterans Day, Florian, if you have that dog tag and you could show it, wow, there it is.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
80 years later, more than 80 years, back in your hands.
Yep. Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. As I said before, I thank you for persevering and finding me and starting this whole process. It's given me a a renewed appreciation. Not that I didn't appreciate people who served in the military before, but just reading all of the discomforts that he went through. You know, we just presume every day that we're going to have shelter and plenty to eat and a quiet night's sleep. We're not going to be bombed all night long. We're not going to be suffering with skin diseases and intestinal diseases in this very wet conditions. So I have to appreciate everyone that served there, that did the hard thing for the greater good beyond themselves, right? So yeah, it's been a real interesting journey for me, and so thank you. That dog tag started something good in my life, and so thank you for that, and thank you for the good work that you both do, connecting people and recording history so we can learn from that. And yeah, you do good work. Thank you.
Well, Ruth, it's people like you that our organization Pacific Rex exists to help and share this information. And the only thing we ask in return is the young lady who found it, Joyce Adona, is if you can write her a thank you letter, I'm sure she will be thrilled. And I explained to her at the time she gave the tag to me that although I didn't know this person, they were American, we would find them and they would write her a letter. So she's looking forward to hearing from you, and perhaps in the future, who knows what's possible. Maybe you'll be pen pals, or could even meet her one day through a call like this. So it is remarkable, not only is history exist in the past, but can connect us in the present day and change the future, as this little dog tag has for you.
Yeah, well, it'd be my pleasure to communicate with her. So if you can arrange that and make the connections, that would be terrific. That's wow, what a little journey here.
Absolutely. And finally, I'd like to thank Florian. Through your position with the Wisconsin National Guard as command historian, you were the one that found Ruth, and I'm excited that we've finally been able to connect. So thank you very much, everybody. I can think of no better way to celebrate the Veterans Day than to have a dog tag from the U.S. Army connect us all together. So
yeah, I will never forget this Veterans Day.
That's right. Well, thank you guys, and stay tuned. We'll include the link to your dad's profile on Pacific Rex, which has his photo and some of the information, and hopefully, with your permission, work to share some of his diary entries from World War II and photos from his album. So thank you, everyone. Veterans Day, we remember him, and we are so glad to have met you today, Ruth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.